Good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon.
Okay. I'm not so sure whether we should give it just 2 more minutes just to check if there's additional people that are logging in, and then we commence with our program. Is it okay?
Happy acting DG.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think we afforded colleagues adequate time to be ready for this meeting. I'm ready to start, colleagues. My name is Shoki Shabalala. I am the Acting Deputy Director General in the department, but originally I am the Deputy Director General responsible for social transformation and economic empowerment in the department. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, to our colleagues that we've invited today from the civil society organizations, but also to our chairperson for the private sector GBVF fund. A special warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for heeding the call when the department requested you to be part of us today and engage you on matters that relate to the implementation of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. And perhaps before we do that, let's note the apologies that have been tendered. Then we move to our next item of in fact, what I should be doing before we even do apologies, my apologies as well on my part. The agenda is tabled before you. Busi, can you project the full agenda? If I can know how to remove this icon that you use to click your hand and everything else, because it obscures my vision. Okay, we have the agenda as projected. The first part, we will take apologies now that I've made my opening remarks. We will allow colleagues to introduce themselves just to get a sense who is here representing which organization. I will then talk briefly to the purpose of the meeting, but then we will move to discussion matters where we will then receive a presentation from our chairperson on the issue that relates to the private sector GBVF Fund 1. We will then take a presentation on progress in implementing the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. 2.2 and 2.3 are actually intertwined shortly after we've received 2.2. In the same PowerPoint presentation, Nondumiso will come in and give us an update on matters that relate to the council and the bill. We will then take questions and answers and close. I'm not so sure if there are additions you would like to make to the agenda, or should we just move for adoption of the agenda? I will await comments from you, colleagues. Anyone that moves for adoption of the agenda?
Colton.
Esther Maluleke?
I move ADG.
Thank you. Laura, I've noted your hand.
Thank you.
You're also endorsing the adoption of the agenda. Okay, may I just switch off my camera? I do have connectivity challenges. So to just strengthen my bandwidth, I would request that I switch off my camera for now. Thanks. And perhaps as and when we speak, whoever that is afforded the platform, just switch on the camera from the onset, and from there you can just switch it off. At least we will have a sense of who is addressing us at that point in time. I then would like to note the apologies if there's any. The first apology that I'm aware of is an apology from Madam Caesar Mahangwe from the Department of Social Development, who cannot join us due to ill health. She has tendered an apology, but it hasn't been easy to secure someone from the Department of Social Development. Hopefully, if there are issues that relate to that department, we'll see how best we can handle those issues. Any other apology that we are aware of, colleagues?
Thank you, ADG. We've got an apology from National Treasury, Bebeziba Malega, who's also on leave, and also an apology also from the colleagues from change.org who rendered their apology that they are not available.
Thanks, and we've noted the change.org apology. I think I've also requested that there be a follow-up to that apology so that they indicate when will they be available and offer us dates that are more 2 or 3 dates so that we are able to also plan on our side in terms of our availability. Then I would like to...
ma'am. Change.org is on the call, just to note that. Thank you.
Oh, change.org is here.
Yes, ma'am.
My apologies. And we really appreciate you being present. Thank you for that. Then may I indicate that the 2 colleagues that are not in our midst, which is National Treasury and CESA, are actually members of the technical task team that supports the Interministerial Committee on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. We're noting the other one is on leave, and we are noting the other one is sick. And I really mean she is sick. I don't want to go into details, but she is sick and she is unable to be in our midst at this point. Now, let's check. There's one colleague we haven't received an apology from her, and that is Madam Praise, Advocate Praise from the Department of Justice and Correctional Development. So constitutional development, what we will do, we'll just keep following up and just determine why she is unable to join us, and probably tender a formal apology in that regard. But then we will just allow the next item, which is 1.3 on introductions. Let's start with colleagues in the department. Over to you, colleagues. GTJS, start first.
Good afternoon. And ADG, I must apologize. Problems with my video on my laptop. It's quite an old laptop, so it's not very helpful. But I'm Esther Maluleke from the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. I'm responsible for a chief directorate called Governance, Transformation, Justice and Security. And that's where implementation of the National Strategic Plan is driven from. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Esther. Let's take the next colleague.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Busisiwe Molonyana, also from Governance, Transformation, Justice and Security. I'm the Senior Secretary to Esther. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Mandla Neku. I work for the department under the same Chief Directorate from Esther. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Cassandra Simpionyati. I'm also from the same Chief Directorate, Governance, Transformation, Justice, and Security. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Whitney Lige. I'm from GTJS under Mnep section. Thank you.
Afternoon, colleagues. My name is Tian Mawela, GTJS. Thank you.
Afternoon, Faras Namutobi from the same directorate. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues.
I think my camera is still is working. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's good to see so many stakeholders in this meeting. My name is Shalayan Gajadar, and I'm responsible for communications at the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. Thank you.
Nondumiso. Nondumiso, come in. Okay. Let's take the next
colleagues. Morning, colleagues. I'm Spino Fante from the Department of Higher Education and Training.
Thank you. Let's take the next one.
Good morning. It's afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Khawreteleli Fifi, and I'm an intern at the Department of Higher Education and Training.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Brigadier. Oh, all right.
Apologies. Come in, Brigadier.
Good morning. Thank you very much, DDG. I'm Brigadier Mnep from South African Police Service. I'm currently the acting component head of FCS at the National Head Office, but I'm from Crime Investigation Services at Division Detectives in Pretoria. Thanks.
And a member of the technical task team supporting the Interministerial Committee for now. Thank you, Brigadier. Next one.
Afternoon, colleagues. It's Fanan Manugu from the Department of Public Service and Administration, responsible for transformation of the public service. And Chair, let me also tender an apology that I'm only available up to 1 o'clock. I already have another engagement. Thank you.
Okay, we'll push speedily. Next one. We seem to be done with government departments. From the GBV Private Sector Fund, can I afford you the opportunity, Chair?
Thanks very much, ADG. My name is Judy Dlamini. I chair the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund 1, and I am not alone. I'll ask Lindy to introduce herself. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Lindy.
Thank you. I'm Lindy Dlamini, and I'm CEO of the GBVF Response Fund 1. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. And let's allow our colleagues that we have invited to introduce themselves. Who is the first taker?
Morning, Acting DG. Morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for a great introduction. My name is Leanne Jamanis. I'm the director and co-founder of the Embrace Project.
Thank you, Leanne.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danai Nando. I'm the country director for change.org. Thank you for inviting us.
Next one, colleagues. Thank you, Danai, and thank you, Leanne.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bronwyn Litke, and I'm the founder and director of SA Women Fight Back NPO.
Thank you. Next one.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invite. My name is Laurelie Gillian, and I'm currently, I would say, an individual activist, and I am doing my master's in Sweden. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Laura. And is that all? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
We seem to have introduced ourselves, all of us. And GTJS is just an abbreviation for the unit that is called Governance, Transformation, Justice and Security. And that is the unit that has been tasked with the responsibility to ensure that the NSP is implemented, it's coordinated, and it's monitored as a department for now, up until such time that the council is in place. Then let's move to the purpose. I'll be very brief on the purpose. Nondumiso, are you here? Okay, I'll give Nondumiso a call. It's important that she's in our midst. Nondumiso is our legal officer in the department, and she's going to talk to the issues around the bill. Now, in terms of purpose, colleagues, we noted that there is a concern that has been raised and expressed through various media platforms that petitions have been served and we have not received a response to date, but also that there was clearly an indication on your part that there is a gap in terms of information or update to date around the NSP itself. And we have deemed it fit that rather let us invite you and take you through the progress to date in terms of the implementation of the NSP and progress to date in terms of the issues that relate to the council. We will then go through all these presentations and we will afford you an opportunity to pose questions for clarity. We will do our level best to take you through what we have done and respond to some of the concerns or issues that you will be raising today. We will be led by Madam Esther Maluleke, who will then talk us through the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and the first one that we want to take so that we can release our colleagues. We are all committed, it's 16 days and all. It's to the chairperson and the CEO so that they can then talk to us around the issues that relates to the private sector fund. Where are we? If there are challenges, they should raise those challenges and also indicate how we are going to forge ahead in the event of challenges that are being raised. Madam Judy, I'm not sure whether you are in a position to project your presentation. And Madam Esther, have your presentation ready as well so that you can project or send it to Busi to assist. Sometimes our laptops are problematic. Over to you, Madam Judy.
Thanks very much, AGG. Thanks, stakeholders, colleagues, good afternoon. It's an honor to be amongst you to tell you about what has happened over the past 10 months. So there's the two of us, the CEO, Lindy, is here, who will give outcomes of the request for proposals 1, which was issued in July. For me, it really is about giving you the background of the fund and the key milestones achieved thus far. Next one, Lindy. Thank you. So as you may be aware, the fund was launched by the President on the 4th of February 2021 to address the scourge, which he called the second pandemic. That of course predates the COVID pandemic. And we as the private sector, we actually are guided by the very comprehensive National Strategic Plan that is known, I'm sure, to all of you. Some of you were involved in structuring it. Next slide, please, Lindy. So at the beginning of time, there was just 5 of us who came from the private sector, and we realized obviously that we were not representative of the sector. So one of the first things that we did using a public announcement and so forth, we were able to make the board representative in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of skills, in terms of age, but also activists within the sector, CBOs, and NGOs, and so forth. So I'm happy to say that today we are a representative board. Next slide, please. So the first things that were obviously important for us was ensuring that governance is up to scratch. The registration of the fund took place, assisted by a pro bono service provider in ENS, the legal firm. And setting up the governance structure was ensuring that we have the committees that we require, your usual audit and risk committee, the investment and fundraising committee, to make sure that the funds raised were actually managed by people who are experts in the space, the disbursement, monitoring and evaluation, to make sure that that is also covered. But we also we have a committee that other boards do not have, and that is peculiar to the challenges that we're trying to address as a fund, and that is the Forensic Science Advisory Committee, that we became aware of its need when we had our first consultation with the stakeholders, the multi-sectorial engagement that we had. That was on the 4th of March, even before we had a representative board. It was important for us to introduce ourselves, who we are, what we're trying to achieve, and get to understand the high priority areas from the community themselves. So the output of that engagement informed this committee that I've just described. So the launch of the RFP was in July. Our CEO, I think, Lindy, you've gone one more. Just go back for me, please. We had to appoint the CEO, which was done 1st of June, and we also appointed the CFO, and we also needed to appoint an implementing agency that would work with us in the form of Chikululu. Together, we put together the theory of change through consultative workshops with the board. At the beginning, when we were launched by the president, we were able to raise 128 million rand in pledges. That has increased to 157, but that had to turn to cash, because it's one thing to pledge, but then that has to turn to cash. And I'm happy to say that our executives have worked very hard for us to be able to say 84% of direct cash has been received of the pledges. In addition to the money raised, we also got pro bono support from 11 organizations and individuals. I won't bore you with the names unless I'm requested to. And as alluded to earlier, the committee tasked with fundraising and investment developed a detailed fundraising strategy, which we are working with, and understanding the challenges that we face as a country because of money that are diverted to COVID. Even some of the NGOs there in the GBVF sector that were receiving funding is now diverted to COVID. But in spite of that, we remain positive that we'll be able to raise more money. Next slide, please, Lindy. Yes, as I was saying, we're happy that our CEO started on the 1st of June. In July already, we had we launched the first RFP for the fund in all official languages across multiple media platforms. We were lucky that we got someone amongst many other skills that she has who speaks 7 languages, local languages, and she was able to go to community radio stations to publicize the RFP because this was important. We received 362 applications in response to the RFP, and the rigorous shortlisting process started, and the disbursements will begin in early 2022 with monitoring and evaluation that will follow around that. As alluded to earlier on, we do have a forensic science advisory committee, which has respected scientists that is advising us on the challenges, especially when it comes to the DNA backlog. We continue to engage with the SAPS to try and find solutions because of the importance of that challenge. We also agreed as part of the theory of change to look at a GBVF dashboard. And with that initiative, we've actually spread the net very wide. We are assisted by data scientists, social scientists, activists in the space, talking to UNICEF, amongst different people to try and make sure that the dashboard that we come up with is comprehensive, and it will help us to monitor the incidents of gender-based violence, be able to be a tool that can be used by survivors or people that are threatened. And there is a lot of work on the ground to try and find ways of coming up with ways to ensure that the data that we have is up to date by engaging with communities. I'm hoping that when I report back in maybe 9 months' time, because these things take time, we'll be able to say this is what we've been able to achieve in that particular space. The multi-sectorial engagement is very important for the fund because we have a mandate from the different stakeholders, some represented on this call, but it goes beyond people that are sitting around this virtual meeting. So after the first consultation on the 4th of March, we had another consultation on the 3rd of September to just give feedback as to where we are and the way forward. I'll now hand you over to Lindy, and we'll stay after our presentation to address any questions that you might have. Thank you. Over to you, Lindy.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody who's on the call for taking the time to just listen to us. So as the chair has said, we ran a call for proposals from the 22nd of July up to the 6th of August, calling for proposals. We received just under 400 applications, and after that rigorous process of ensuring that the proposals are aligned to the purpose of the call in terms of the requirements of pillars 2 and 3 as advertised, we have now allocated and the board has approved payment of 69 million rand in grant payments to 110 community-based organizations, as well as at least 3 intermediary organizations that are focused on addressing gender-based violence in South Africa. We have made sure that we focus on under-resourced areas, and I will go into a bit of detail into how we've gone about doing that, but I can confirm that 60% of the approved funds are going to rural and informal areas, and 20 million has been allocated to interventions that are in communities that have been highlighted as hotspots. So following the theory of change, then we then ensured that there are a couple of things that we wanted to prioritize. We wanted to prioritize help reaching far and wide. We wanted to ensure a proportionate split in funding that goes to rural areas, funding that goes to peri-urban areas, funding that goes to urban areas, funding that goes to underfunded provinces and so forth. And with this view, I'm really just giving you a sense of the breakdown in funding between what is going to go directly to community-based organizations, which is 42 million, and intermediaries. Intermediaries, we have indicated 3 to 4 because 3 of them have committed, but 1 is considering their ability to scale up to the level of delivery. And if they're unable to do so, then the 3 will pick up the slack. Now, in terms of the breakdown, as I said, when the board met to conceptualize the RFP, there were a number of things coming out of the civil society engagement of the 4th of March. And that was to say, help has got to reach ground roots organizations that we all acknowledge are overburdened and under-resourced. We also took account of the fact that there are quite a number of organizations that don't meet the needs for eligibility for funding, for instance, with a fund such as ours, as well as a host of other funders. And so when you see us referencing intermediaries and the quantum of funding that's going to intermediaries, one of our mandates received from those civil society formations was the fact that we need to ensure that capacity is built on the ground, support is provided to those CBOs that need to grow, be mentored, as well as provided with assistance to meet funders' requirements. And so what you see now is a breakdown of the funding distribution. 4% goes to communities that are considered a combination of informal and urban. Informal settlements take up 20% of the funding, urban areas 37% of the funding, rural areas taking 40% of the funding. We also noted when we started the call that COVID has exacerbated the mental health crisis that we are experiencing in the country, and we wanted to ensure that sufficient attention is devoted to mental health funding, and that in the initiatives and programs that are put forward, we see a support for mental health in communities. And so we saw 34% of programs having a mental health support element, as well as a combination of pillars 2 and 3. You see on the right, 67% of the funding is going towards purely pillar 2 initiatives, 13% to pillar 3, and then 20% a combination of the 2. When we started the process, we noted that provinces such as the Eastern Cape, such as Limpopo, such as KZN, did not have sufficient funding. And so in looking at the approval process, we really tried to ensure that there is a proportionate allocation per province. And in looking at that, we came up with a formula to say of available funding and looking at population numbers, looking at the incidence of GBVF in the different provinces, looking at current known levels of funding, what is it that needs to be done to ensure that there's a more proportionate split, and that then culminated in this breakdown that you see before you. We, at the end of the process, really had to work through and augment some of the funding for provinces such as KZN, the Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, Free State, Northwest, as well as Limpopo. In terms of hotspots, as we know, there are around 30 hotspots that were identified or that are identified by the SAPS. And we really had to go back to some of the social scientists, researchers, and academic community members that we work with who are GBVF experts to understand whether that list can be considered to be comprehensive or whether we needed to augment it. We know that there are changes every day in the listing of communities that are badly affected, and we needed to ensure that there is a rapid response that goes to those communities and that we don't miss them because they've fallen through the criteria for SAPS. And through that engagement and consultative process, we added 15 additional communities such as Lusikisiki, such as Toyando, there's a host of others, to ensure that we are ensuring that the targeted funding reaches those hotspots. And so by adding to that number, we're able to ensure that there is funding that's going to be targeted to those hotspots. The approach that we then took was to say, because there are insufficient proposals that were received from on-the-ground organizations, we then worked with the intermediaries to then identify CBOs on the ground within those hotspot communities that we can provide support to and ensure that there is sufficient coverage to respond and provide on the ground assistance in those hotspot communities. And so where we are with the communication and the process of reverting and ultimately getting to the state where we are transferring these funds to grant recipients, to all grant partners that have been approved in this process. As at yesterday, of the 110 community-based organizations, it's only 7 that we haven't reached, and we hope to have reached those by end of today. And we had communicated successfully to all unsuccessful applicants as at yesterday. So we expect in the next week, in the next 3 weeks, we'll be conducting monitoring and evaluation workshops with those community-based organizations. And the purpose of those workshops is really to take grant recipients through the responsibilities that come with the contract, through the understanding of what the fund requires by way of accountability from a monitoring and evaluation perspective, to ensure that it's not too onerous, to understand what support they need on the ground in order to ensure that they can effectively deliver on the proposals that they have put forward, and to ensure that they understand the contracting process. And so we will have finalized that process by mid-December when we part ways. By end of January, we hope for all grant recipients to have signed their contracts so that we can disperse from February onwards. Apologies for that timeline under payments. It's incorrect and has to be rolled forward. We'll only be making payments from January to February 2022. So with that brief overview, I wanted to pause and take any questions together with my chairman that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you to yourselves, colleagues, Madam Judy and Madam Lindy. I'm going to allow for questions for clarity so that we can release you. Let's make sure, colleagues, that everything that relates to the private sector GBVF Fund 1 is addressed now during this session, because the next session is going to talk to just the NSP itself. I've noted Leanne. Is there any other hand? TG, who is TG? Let me just check. Leanne, you can come in first. You'll be followed by TG. It's not clear to me who is TG.
Thank you, Acting DG. First of all, thank you, Lindy and Judy, for the presentation. That was very comprehensive. It's really appreciated. My questions are just going to be around the RFPs and the allocations. As an organization that obviously would have wanted to apply for funding, I think we clearly missed the call for RFPs. So my questions around there is, how long did you say the RFP proposal, the process was actually open for? I heard July to August, so was it just a month span?
Yes, it was 3 weeks actually.
Okay, so shorter than 1 month. And also in terms of eligibility criteria to put forward any sort of proposals, was that contained anywhere? Because when I last went onto the GBVF Response Fund 1's website, I couldn't find any eligibility criteria.
There was actually a link on our website that clicked through to the Chikululu website as our implementation partner, and went into all the requirements for application. We clearly indicated a distinction between requirements for CBOs and requirements for intermediaries. And we had an FAQ as well that helped, that was intended to help potential applicants to understand which application best suits their circumstances.
Okay, and thank you, Lindy. And then you say that this was, or the RFP process was advertised sort of almost in every language. Was this just over radio?
Yes, so we did press releases to major national and regional stations. I was on ETV, I was on SABC1, but we also published that press release in 9 of the 11 official languages. We sent it to a number of community radio stations and publications, and I spoke at quite a number of those regional ones at the time.
Thank you, Lindy. And then I think I just have one more question. It speaks to, I guess, the longevity of the fund. So I see that you guys said it was in your plan, this was disbursements for year 1 grants. So I to understand then that these are not going to be just one-off disbursements, that there is some sort of continuity to the fund, and it won't be the last time you also call for RFP proposals.
Yeah, so actually this RFP is RFP 1, and the grants are over a 2-year period. And why we're going through an M&E process is exactly to explain that to grant partners, so that at the end of year 1 they fulfill their requirements and are eligible for second-year funding. So in considering the programs, we've really approved over 2 years in terms of setting aside the funds. But of course, organizations are going to have to report back at the end of year 1. And the reason was to ensure that there isn't a disruptiveness. I think that's the other thing that we were given as feedback, to ensure that our funding is not too short-term, to ensure that there is sustainability over the 2 years. We expect to launch another call for proposals in the course of next year, in tandem with our ability to raise funds to be able to meet that demand.
Okay, so you can't give a specific date at the moment for the second call?
No, we can't, because as a non-profit, we can only devote that which we have funding for. We also have a philosophy that we don't retain funds as the fund. We want to disperse as much as possible. And so in our own cash flows, for instance, you will see an amount ring-fenced. And in both our fundraising and investment committees, the mandate is really that we do not hoard any cash. And so we call for proposals in keeping with our ability to raise funds. This is now the cycle that we are getting into now, the fundraising in tandem with the grant making to prepare us for the next cycle.
Thank you very much, Lindy and Judy. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you so much. I see, is that Browning? Browning, did you have your hand up?
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to make a point linked to something Leanne said. We also acknowledge and recognize that our website has got to be a better source of information. So we are in the process of upgrading the website, and that's due for launch in the course of December. So you will see at least a lot more, or the website will be a lot more informative than it currently is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I think there is BL, not sure who BL is, and DN in that order.
Yeah, that's me, Bronwyn. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Lindy, thank you for your presentation. My organization, SA Women Fight Back, did actually apply for the fund. We sent in everything, but we haven't had any communication since then. We got a receipt of that it had been received, but we haven't had any communication. So I just wanted to know, are you going to be transparent about the people that were selected? Which organizations were selected?
Yes, we are going to be publishing the full list of 110 on the website of the fund. We think that that is important. Wonderful. Twofold reason for other people to see, but also we'll do it by region because we also believe that people who are on the ground, members of communities, need to know that there is assistance in their areas.
Wonderful, thank you. We hold hands with quite a lot of GBV organizations, so it would be nice to see who we can rely on. Yes. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Browning and DN.
Thank you so much. I think my question relates more to, on a practical level, once obviously the funds have been dispersed to the various organizations, I just wanted to understand how would the impact of these organizations be relayed to the public? And I'm asking it from the perspective of, I think we work with ordinary citizens that start petitions on our platform. And a lot of times, I think, obviously, when they start petitions, either they're starting them from the perspective of personal experiences of gender-based violence, what they're seeing within the news or the statistics that are coming out around crime and gender-based violence within South Africa. I think finding a way to actually bring out the impact of the investment that's being made into these organizations would be important, both in terms of just showing that, this is what the fund has done and this is the impact. But in addition to that, to make sure that when we work with citizens, it's done from a place of information and understanding.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, it's twofold. Firstly, it's ensuring that people are aware who has received funding and should be providing support and services on the ground. And then secondly, the chair, Dr. Judy, made reference to a multi-sectoral engagement that we have. I think we had the first one on the 21st of August, and we intend for these to be quarterly. The reason for those is so that we get feedback on some of the matters we might not be aware of. There's a formal process through which CBOs will be reporting and through which we will use. So there's a quarterly reporting that's going to come through via Chigululu, which we will bring into the multi-sectoral engagements. And the purpose of those multi-sectoral engagements is twofold. It's part of our our accountability framework, but it's also to provide an opportunity to listen and hear what we may not see, what we may not be aware of, and what other partners may be experiencing or wanting to make us aware of challenges, difficulties, and so forth. So all of the applicant CBOs have since been added to our communication database and will, as a matter of course, be invited to the multi-sectoral engagements going forward.
Okay, we seem to be okay. Any further question? Chairperson, perhaps you must also talk to the consultation session that was held with civil society organizations. You will recall that there was a consultation session where you introduced yourselves to the CSOs and you spoke about them looking forward to the adverts and all of that. You prepared the groundwork prior to the actual adverts, the RFQs. I don't know whether you want to talk to that.
Yes, sir, indeed. Thanks very much, ADG. Yes, we actually felt it was very important for us to engage with the CBOs, and we were hosted by the presidency. It was chaired by Professor Olive Shisana, and this was on the 4th of March, if I'm not mistaken. So it was really a two-pronged approach. It was to say, here is the response fund, and these are the board members currently. 2, we need to understand what are the top 3 things that you would like us to address once we are up and running and we've set up the infrastructure. 3, be on the lookout for the RFP. Once we are ready and everything is set up, we'll be sending out the RFP. Now, what that assisted us with is that over and above sending out the RFP to the media channels that the CEO has alluded to, is that we had those email addresses. I think we also, assisted by the presidency, were able to send to those people that came to the meeting. And the next meeting that our CEO was alluding to was to actually give feedback to say, this is the governance structure that we have put together. At the beginning, you met 5 of us. We are now a representative board. These are the board members. And when we had the first consultation, these are the top areas that you identified that the board needs to take care of. That includes what the CEO has spoken to, the informal settlement CBOs, the rural area CBOs. So it was, we wanted to make sure that we don't leave people that tend to be left behind, because as we know, in big cities, big NGOs have access to funds, and yet the people on the ground who are doing incredible work don't have access to these opportunities. And informal settlements and rural areas also tend to get left behind. That informed our decision to work with the intermediaries to access the people who ordinarily wouldn't be able to access the funds, but are doing amazing work. And I must thank one of our partners, because we take collaboration very seriously. One of our partners that not only funded us, but continues to work with us, Ford Foundation, spoke to us about the importance of these intermediaries, how they work with them, and we took the cue from that. So we are a young learning organization, and we take these interactions very seriously. So the quarterly briefings are actually to attend to that, and we look forward to having you at these quarterly civil society briefings. I hope I've addressed it. Yeah.
One last point, and I think that the ADG was alluding to it, that part of the reason why the last multi-sectoral engagement session happened on the 20th of August, it was also to mobilize support to spread the word around the RFP, and to ensure that those organizations that are represented there, that have tentacles into a number of NGOs, NPOs, CSOs, and CBOs, can spread the word, because this multi-sectoral happened on the eve of the launch of the RFP. Thank you.
Thanks for that, CEO.
Thank you so much to yourself, CEO and Chairperson. I guess we now ready to release you, but what we will do, we will share the contact details of our participants today so that they are in your database. And when you do your next update session or whatever form of consultation, they are also invited and they will be in the loop. Thank you so much. We will then release you, but if you want to stay because you have the time to do so, for the NSP one, you are most welcome to do so. May I then hand over to Madam Esther for the NSP presentation.
Thank you. Thanks,
much
very
appreciated, Chairperson.
Sure.
Esther? Madam Esther?
Sorry, ADG, I'm trying to locate my slides for some reason. I can't project. I can't see them on the screen.
Is it possible
Busi?
probably to send them to Busi?
No, she has already. Busi, maybe try from your side to see. For some reason, they don't appear. Yo. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Busi. Just put them on slideshow. Thank you, ADG and colleagues. I'm just going to quickly run through the slides. And as you said, the last 2 slides will be, Busi, no, go back to the first slide. Will be presented by Nondomiso. Colleagues, I think in my opening remarks, it's important to note that what I'm going to present to you It's a reflective report, and it covers the first year of implementation of the NSP. You'll recall that the President launched this NSP on the 30th of April in 2020. So this report covers 2020 and 2021 financial year. In other words, what I'm going to talk about is it's only the work done until 31st of March 2021. There's been great progress ever since, which is not really captured here because soon we'll be working on the year 2 report. So please bear with me because this is information, a report that is approved both by the Minister and the IMC, the Interministerial Committee on Gender-Based Violence, and was basically launched by the President. Next slide, we see. So just to remind us that this slide, it's basically about theory of change. It's a summary of the National Strategic Plan. I just want to highlight in the slide that the strategy centers around 3 critical issues. You'll see that right at the center of the slide, which is prevention, responsiveness, and accountability. And at the top, you'll note that it stands on 6 pillars. And I'll come back to those when I report on each pillar. But with regard to prevention, we have changed the approach of how we respond to gender-based violence in the country. You know, because you are in the sector, you understand. Our approach over the years has been very reactive, both, you know, from government side and civil society, broadly speaking. And we mostly focus on prevention during 16 days, like we are doing currently. And this is not enough. So the strategy basically requests us to harness all to respond to the crisis and to address the structural drivers of gender-based violence, and basically to stop violence before it happens. Our interventions at the moment are responsive. They come in, including the criminal justice system, after the fact, when women and children have been violated. And that's not good enough. And that's why we don't see much impact in terms of what we are doing, what we are investing in, and as far as programs are concerned. So prevention for this strategic plan is extremely critical. And that's where we want to invest a lot of resources in, both human and financial, in changing attitudes of South Africans and really addressing not only structural drivers, but also issues of harmful masculinities and the way, you know, we treat women and children in this country. So in as far as responsiveness is concerned, I think we are urged by this plan to be very responsive and respond with agility. In other words, when someone is violated, you don't turn a blind eye, whether it's your child, whether it's your partner, or whether it's your neighbor, or, you know, an acquaintance. All of us have got responsibility as citizens, as a nation, to do something about it. And the other critical element of the strategy is accountability. The strategy emphasizes accountability across the board. And you will note that we always talk about a whole society approach. And this is what the NSP is about. That is not only the responsibility of government, it's a responsibility of civil society, the private sector, everyone, including citizens, individuals, to account in terms of what they are doing to respond to gender-based violence. In as far as pillars, next slide, we see, then I'll start talking about the pillars. So as I said, this is a summary snapshot of year one. Next slide, we see. So I'll talk about each pillar, what we've managed to do in year one, and reflect on each of the pillars that I'm going to present. As we know, pillar one is about accountability, coordination, and leadership. And this pillar is basically driven by the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. Because we need to provide leadership, we need to coordinate the work and enforce accountability and compliance with reporting compliance. Now, what we managed to do in year one, in as far as coordination, structures, and accountability are concerned, you probably are aware that there's an interministerial committee on gender-based violence that was established by Cabinet, and really to provide political guidance in as far as implementation of the strategy is concerned, but also to make sure that there's establishment of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence. So within the financial year under review, we managed to draft the National Council on Gender-Based Violence framework. We developed it, and the portfolio committee working together with other structures of parliament developed the oversight framework, which is in place and it's approved, and the parliament uses it as a guide to provide oversight in terms of implementation of this plan. We also managed to ensure that gender-based violence and femicide is a standing item at FOSAD meetings, and not only FOSAD meetings, which is a DG a cluster within government, even with other clusters like economic cluster, social cluster, and justice and security cluster. We also managed to implement and establish what we call a collaborative platform, which is a multi-sectoral platform. And I'll come back to this after I talk about this pillar. And we are now ensuring, and started already in the first year, to establish coordinating structures at province and local level. You know that the NSP emphasize localization of interventions and programs on gender-based violence. So that's why these structures are very critical. Colleagues, what I spoke about really talks to the department making sure that the National Strategic Plan is institutionalized. Institutionalization for us is extremely critical because we want to mobilize the whole of government and society approach to gender-based violence. And embedding the NSP in plans of government and processes, it's extremely critical. And the reason is, colleagues, unless you have the NSP integrated into the planning and budgeting cycle of government, we will not see the kind of results that we are anticipating. Over the years, that has not happened. Programs on gender mainstreaming broadly have been running parallel to programs of government. And for us, it's important that we ensure that this is mainstreamed. NSP is mainstreamed in planning. In other words, each year when departments review their APPs, they need to make sure that the targets of the NSP are included in the APP, because that's the only time the bureaucrats will take responsibility for implementing those targets and actually provide resources for them in terms of budget. So this is very critical. But beyond that, we've been working extensively with COPTA because we also want to integrate targets of the NSP in both District 1 plans, municipal IDPs, as well as district development model interventions. And for this, we even prioritize hotspots. Next slide, Busi. We also, again, related to institutionalization, are busy and trying to finalize the draft Mnep implementation plan. You will note that the MNE framework that we have in the NSP is very broad. It's a guide. It doesn't have the details. So what the department is doing, again, working with key stakeholders, is to ensure that we now drill down into unpacking that framework and ensuring that the targets and indicators are smart, but also that departments own those targets, because that's the only time. And owning means they recognize them, they accept them, and those targets are in line with the mandate of the departments. So I've already spoken about integration into APPs, and our DG also established what we call Provincial DG Forum, because she wants to engage constantly, at least on a quarterly basis, with provincial DGs. And that's another way for the department to monitor and ensure that the seamless coordination of implementation of the strategy across the board. We also brought additional capacity within the department in the form of a secretariat. And this is just to close the gap in the absence of the National Council. We have 3 colleagues that have joined us on a contract basis so that they can assist in terms of capacity of implementation and monitoring implementation of the strategy. At the time of releasing this report, we had 5 provincial implementation plans that were finalized and 5 functional GBV coordination teams in place in various provinces, for example, KZN, Eastern Cape, etc. And we are continuing to assist other provinces to establish these structures. And the reason is that, as you can see, we're already implementing the NSP. We can't wait for the council to be in place before we roll out this strategy. Work needs to happen, there's agency, and council will basically just take over from where we left. In terms of resourcing, I'm not going to bore you with the details. Already the colleagues from the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Response Fund 1 have already spoken extensively on that. And we know now that the money that was pledged, it has even increased. And next slide, Pussy. So reflecting on this pillar, we have learned that high level of leadership has served to mobilize a much wider societal base against gender-based violence. And this includes the private sector and faith-based sector. We have greater buy-in of taking a multi-sectoral approach to GBV and grounding the NSP at local and provincial levels. And this is very critical for successful implementation. And let me pause to talk a little bit about this multi-sectoral approach we're talking about. You've heard earlier on, I said we've established what we call a collaborative platform. This is a voluntary platform constituted by government, civil society, the private sector, faith-based across the board. And this was to ensure that there are no, because of absence of the council, and that we continue to do the work that was done by the Interim Steering Committee on Gender-Based Violence that produced the NSP. It's important to make you aware that this platform is free, it's voluntary, we're not paying a cent to civil society organizations because they recognized that capacity of government is insufficient and they want to be part of making a change in as far as fighting gender-based violence is concerned. So I pause here, ADG, because I want to invite colleagues, if they're not part of this collaborative, because that's where information is shared, that's where people get to know what is happening. So it would be very helpful for them to join us if they haven't joined. And if you will, ADG, you can allow Whitney to show the website of the collaborative, and you will see that we try as much as possible to share information on that website of NSP implementation. But we also have a lot of other social media platforms that we want to use to actually communicate the work that we do around the strategy, including having now released 4 newsletters, and we can share all that information to bring them up to speed in terms of the work of government and stakeholders around implementation of the strategy. But what we need to change, colleagues, and as far as this pillar is concerned, is lack of ownership and leadership by senior officials. I've alluded to the fact that we're working very hard to institutionalize, including ensuring that DGs are kept up to speed and that they actually action recommendations that are made where there is necessity to make changes within government and the system. We also want to make sure that there's inadequate mechanisms to strengthen multi-sectoral reporting. So this is an area of weakness that we again continue to work on around reporting. Since March 2021, it has improved drastically. At that time of putting together this report, we only had 10 departments consistently reporting on the NSP, but today we're sitting with 25, more or less, departments that send reports every month to the department, that is consolidated and sent to the president, because he wants these reports monthly so that he can keep track of what is happening around gender-based violence. There's also lack of technical capacity to implement. And really these technical skills and knowledge related to gender mainstreaming, broadly speaking. And here our focus is mainly on local government. There's terrible, terrible weaknesses that we're trying to see how we work around to ensure that there's effective implementation of the strategy. And you know, colleagues, about resourcing levels is still very poor. This is work in progress. And we consistently, as department, try and engage the National Treasury to come on board, but also to make sure that departments put resources aside to ensure that targets that are allocated to them are resourced and implemented. Next slide. I'll quickly run through the rest of the pillars because I really just wanted to emphasize the work, which is really what we spend most of the time doing, which was pillar 1. Pillar 2, another very critical pillar of the NSP. In terms of achievements, I don't know if I've mentioned earlier on, but the department is currently developing what we call comprehensive national strategy on gender-based violence prevention. We are almost at the final stages of developing this strategy. Just yesterday, we had through the collaborative platform, the third or fourth consultations that we call spotlights, where we engage with our stakeholders on the work that we do. So if colleagues in the room again are not au fait with this process, they're welcomed. They must indicate. We can have a special session again to take them through that prevention strategy so they can provide their own input into it. But also the National School of Governance has rolled out a 5-day online course covering gender mainstreaming, broadly speaking, including GBV, but also focuses on the gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation framework for the public sector. We also held several capacity building, and we continue to do so on gender-based violence with SALGA, COCTA, across all 9 provinces. As I said, really our best bet is to make sure that this level of government has the necessary skills and the capacity to implement the NSP, because gender-based violence happen in communities where sometimes government can't reach. For instance, South African police. We know that GBV happens behind closed doors. We can't have policemen in every household to see what is happening. So, as I said, that's why we came about with the whole society approach. And SALGA and COCTA play a very critical role to make sure that this NSP becomes a success. In terms of communication, we drafted the National Communication Strategy that is aligned to the NSP, and this will probably form a chapter of the National Prevention Strategy, but this was finalized and approved, and this is a communication strategy that we want to use to actually improve communication around GBV. And again, it was a work that was done multi-sectorally. We had a number of sustained anti-GBV media campaigns implemented by either GCIS. We've had community dialogues through webinars because of COVID-19, largely last year. We continue to post on social media using Twitter, Facebook, and whatever. Public education through radio talk shows. And this work, colleagues, continues. Other interventions include a range of interventions with key sectors which have been piloted. For instance, the campaign that we ran as a department with the taxi industry. And we continue to build on the work we started last year. You know that we have in the past serious problems around taxis and gender-based violence. So we do awareness raising campaigns, and it has been a challenge and very difficult because you can't take taxi drivers away from their work. So we actually reach out and go directly to taxi ranks to do this work, which is not very easy, but we try our best. But they are very engaged, they are very interested in working with us to fight the scourge. We also had 7,000 illegal liquor outlets closed because it's another strategy that we are using to actually fight the scourge of gender-based violence throughout the country. to really address the impact of alcohol, which is linked to GBV. And colleagues might have noticed last year in June what happened when we went to lockdown level, I think it was 3. What happened? Within a week, we had picked up 21 bodies of women. And it's, you know, there's understanding that these are also linked to abuse of substances. Next slide, which is in terms of reflection. These are some of the things that we've learned, that we need to harness the efforts of different role players and move in the same direction. We also need to harness key influencers of social norms, faith leaders, to take this work forward. As I said, there's a collaborative platform specifically for faith-based, and it's quite huge. If Nomkobelo is in the meeting, she can indicate the level of participation of that collaborative platform. Again, we have learned that we need really a dedicated strategy, prevention strategy, to address, as I said, structural drivers of GBV, including changing norms and attitudes and behaviors of people. We think if we move in that direction, we can make a big dent in as far as gender-based violence is involved. And the strategy will move beyond just having campaigns like 16 days. We want to begin to invest in evidence-based programs, programs and interventions that we know will produce results and move us towards eradication of this scourge. We also have learned that closing liquor outlets needs to be accompanied by community interventions, focusing on substance abuse and violence prevention. So we need to do more than just close these shebeens. We also need to supplement media with targeting specific groups with behavior change interventions, as I said, taxi drivers. But this is not the only sector we are focusing on. We'll be expanding, but really strategically selecting those that we know if we work with and focus on, they'll make immediate difference. Next slide, we see. For pillar 3, and as far as achievements are concerned, this pillar really built on where ERAP, which is the Emergency Response Plan, left, because we started at that time to really focus on legislative reform. And the following bills are have been considered by Parliament by now. The Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Bill, Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, Sexual Offences Related Matters Amendment Bill, Criminal and Related Matters Bill being considered by Parliament, as I said. And I think this process is advanced. If Advocate Praise is in the meeting, has joined ADG, maybe she can talk a little bit about this. But I must also highlight that from the reports that we are gathering as a department on a monthly basis, there's other bills. We have about 12. These are only 3 that we've really are in the public domain. But there are other 9 bills that we started focusing on last year that are being amended and worked on. And SMS notification systems for application of domestic violence protection orders was launched at all district courts, and 32 regional courts were ready for designation into sexual offences courts by the 21st of March this year, and 6 TCCs in the process of being established and 8 case managers appointed to capacitate the TCCs. So we're tracking this work, but just to indicate that 29,593 matters were dealt with in the first year of implementation of the strategy, and annual conviction rate was more or less 94% over the financial year under review, and the overall conviction rate for all sexual offenses was about 76%. And the 3,409 cases which were investigated by the FCS were reached through trauma debriefing sessions. Sorry, I can't see that. I'm obscured by this little belt and I don't know how to remove it. But colleagues, what I can say here is that we have rapid results challenge with 11 courts which were conducted by the Department of Justice, because this challenge was a, if I'm not wrong, a 3 months or 6 months challenge. We started during ERAP to actually deal with a case backlog on domestic violence and sexual offenses. And overall 98%, there was 98% reduction of these cases just related to this intervention. Next slide. Reflecting on Pillar 3, we've learned that incidences of GBV have continued to rise. And we've just seen, colleagues, even with the recent release of crime statistics by the minister. And we've seen how COVID-19 also impacted on cases of GBV. So this remains a crisis that we need to work even harder to actually deal with. Addressing the, I don't know what this acronym means, FSL, capacity challenges as one of the systematic issues driving these backlogs. I think this
Sorry, Madam, it's the forensic laboratory services.
Yes, the forensic laboratories. I think this is a another issue that really even the interministerial committee is very concerned about, the issue of cases that are stuck now because of lack of capacity in DNA. This remains a big challenge that IMC is paying attention to, and the Minister of Safety and Security. Training targets were severely compromised by COVID-19 context, and adjustment needs to be made to continue to facilitate ongoing capacity development on gender-based violence. And we're talking here across government. So given the levels of trauma that police officers and others are exposed to in relation to GBV and more broadly, there's a need to have consistent trauma briefing sessions for police and any other key stakeholders within government to actually enable them to cope and be better prepared to deal with the issues of GBV. Next slide. For Pillar 4, colleagues, as I indicated, around strengthening of existing services. And here we're talking about policy, funding, research, and infrastructure. We managed to have a draft, what we call Victim Support Services Bill, which was gazetted and is probably finalized by now. There's also a draft intersectoral policy on sheltering services that was developed. A draft policy on provision of psychosocial services developed as well. Research on minimum cost services package and related costing concluded, and funding model for NGOs that are providing services. It is now in place. And we also managed to fund 249 civil society organizations to the value of almost 40 million. And this process, again, colleagues, started during ERAP. And as I speak, we've been trying to conclude it with NDA, but during the year under review, these are was the money that was allocated to these organizations. Of course, this process was affected by COVID-19 and going into lockdown. So doing site visits and ensuring that we allocate the last tranche of this VEP funding was delayed. And as I said, only now that we are trying to finalize this process, working together with DSD and NDA. And the command center, which you know it's managed by Department of Social Development, was upgraded and moved to Salvocop. And the department also, employed 8 additional social workers to assist with dealing with issues of GBV. We have 12 public buildings renovated and handed over to DSD by Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. And these buildings are going to be used specifically for sheltering survivors and victims of GBV. And in as far as expansion of psychosocial services are concerned, 100% of departments in public service have wellness policies and can avail counseling in the workplace. Higher Health, which is another agency of the Department of Higher Education, is implementing 24-hour national crisis line for students needing assistance. Next slide, Busi. Reflecting on Pillar 4, we've learned that legislation and policy needs to be finalized to facilitate uptake of institutions such as workplaces and society more broadly. The minimum core services package that is costed needs to be taken forward, in other words, implemented now, and quality of services metrics needs to be developed and monitored to ensure link with healing components of pillar. And debriefing of all frontline service providers remains extremely critical so that we are able to effectively deal with issues of secondary victimization. And establishment of local rapid response teams. These are teams that should at all times respond with agility, as I said, at local level to address any cases of gender-based violence that are reported. Next slide, Busi. Moving to Pillar 5, in as far as economic power is concerned, we know now that we've moved from talking about 30% preferential procurement of women-owned businesses to, we've increased it to 40%. And this is the work that this pillar, through the collaborative, because we do have task teams for each pillar that are facilitating work within the collaborative. This is the work that they've been really working hard to push, working with government, especially relevant entities like the National Treasury. So 79% of those employed in community work programs are women, beyond COCTA's target of 55%. So we're trying to broaden this intervention around economic power as much as possible. So as you can see there, 1,205 women-owned businesses out of 5,000 were reached as part of the 120-day challenge that we had. Progress towards the ratification of ILO, you know that the needle here has shifted as well. There's great progress. The Parliament has approved basically a ratification of this, and there's a process now in place to actually working with ILO or to actually finalize issues of ratification. Pledges were made at National Dialogue by all NEDLEC sectors in December 2020 towards addressing violence and harassment in the workplace. Again, NEDLEC, it's working rigorously with government and departments to ensure ratification of the ILO Convention 190. So we are pleased that we were able actually also to bring NEDLEC as a key player into the fold, and they are participating very actively in processes of the collaborative platform. Gender responsive training of COVID relief measures. This was very critical for us to do because we know the coexistence of COVID-19 with gender-based violence. So we tried as much as possible to track what was happening, often with challenges and frustrations around availability of data. But we are trying to do as much as is possible to at least get a picture of what is happening on the ground. Special housing needs policy and program is in the process of being developed, and maintenance system for tracking and responding to defaulters is being strengthened. Just a few weeks ago, we had a very successful session on issues of maintenance and gender-based violence. And this is a process that the department is taking very seriously and trying to see whether there's, improvements that we can make in this area. Next slide. We see, so reflecting on Pillar 5, we've learned that policy and programming processes that provide socioeconomic relief for women and protect them and other vulnerable groups from violence in the world of work need to be fast-tracked. And these are, as I said earlier on, programs at least that are receiving sharp focus at the moment in as far as implementation of NSP is concerned. We're also rigorously tracking the 40% women owned business procurement policy across the public sector. And again, colleagues, this is one issue that is consistently on the agenda of clusters, including FOSAT, because we're really trying to see and ensure that this happens. Drawing on the gender responsive planning, monitoring and evaluation framework, there needs to be ongoing tracking of gender responsiveness of COVID-19 economic recovery and relief measures. Next slide. And I think colleagues, with this pillar moving quite close to ending this presentation, you know that it focuses on research and information management. And what we managed to do in year one is the fact that the Medical Research Council is currently in the field collecting data for the third femicide study. In fact, that was then in year one, but I think there's been a lot of progress made around this femicide study at the moment. And the fourth femicide survey is also underway to understand femicide in the context of COVID-19 period of 2020. And the HSRC has developed a proposal and has been funded to conduct the national GBVF prevalence study. You know that this is one of the huge gaps in terms of data around GBV. Pillar 6 of implementation, Collaborative has established a forum for researchers to share information. And this forum is extremely active, and there's a lot of information that has already been shared, colleagues, that is very, very useful to help us in terms of dealing with issues of GBV. As I said, it would be very useful for you to be part of the collaborative and actually decide which pillar you want to participate in. In as far as information management is concerned, StatsSA has produced a research report on harmonizing and standardizing disability definitions and classifications, which will be key in taking research forward on GBV in this population. Next slide. Busi, what's happening? Reflecting on Pillar 6, we've learned that this pillar is foundational in strengthening GBV response in the country. Indeed, there's a lot of things and issues that we don't understand in as far as GBV is concerned. And these are the areas that the Pillar 6 is focusing on at the moment. It provides a unique opportunity to deepen and expand GBV research base, whilst also expanding the researcher base in the country. And not only will it serve South Africa, but potentially assist South Africa to share insight and good practices in the region as well as globally. building greater strategic cohesion across research community and facilitating alignment with policy and programming. And it will also assist us in the process of strengthening integration of respective management information system which is key for measurement of progress and assessing systems effectiveness. Now, in conclusion, colleagues, we see next slide. I spoke about this collaborative already. I don't want to repeat myself. As you can see on the slide, there's a broader collaborative forum which is constituted. At that time, in year one, it grew from 36 to 82 organizations, but to date, we have about 400 participants in this. And now we not only have task teams per pillar, we also have different working groups. So it's growing, it's being strengthened with various committees and working together. We're really beginning to shape some of the responses around GBV. And then we also have another huge one, which is the faith-based that I spoke about. Also, it grew from 44 organizations that were participating to 182 organizations. So there's a lot that is happening, not only from the government side, but working together with stakeholders. Next slide. Just reflecting on multi-sectoral collaboration. We know that it's important to have shared responsibility for the work of the pillars and implementation of the NSP. There's a great call, and this is constant, for civil society to be respected. We also noted that people are putting a lot of effort and energy in supporting government to implement the strategy and reflect effectively on GBV. We started struggling, people not, being paid for their hours, but we found ways through the collaborative of raising funds, of reimbursing at least colleagues that are doing work and are supplementing the work of the department. And this so far has worked well. We have, for instance, partners like Ford Foundation that have come on board, apart from the work that is done through the GBV Private Sector Response One Fund. We continue to build more positive relationships. This is very critical for us, based on trust and mutual respect and accountability. There needs to be better ongoing communication. We know that this is one of the biggest weaknesses of government, communicating effectively. It's work in progress, and we hope to get it right at some point. And issues of adequate resourcing, especially for civil society organizations, remain one of the thorny issues that we are grappling with. Next slide. Just reflecting on reporting. When in year one, the president had requested us to submit reports to his office on a weekly basis. And we've done so from June last year up until April. But for this year, we've, changed that to reporting on a monthly basis. And the reason is that reporting on weekly basis, of course, it was based on urgency of the matter, and the president wanted to know, basically, because it doesn't give at least departments enough time to implement this. At least let's give people a month so that we can get substance out of this report. But what we learned, especially as a department, because we are the ones that are consolidating these reports and sending and consolidated one to the president. One of the things that we've picked up was non-alignment with NSP outcomes. You know that, colleagues, government has been trying to respond to this scourge over the years. So work has not started only with IRAP and NSP. So by the time the NSP was launched, some departments already had interventions that were trying to fight the scourge. But we noted that these interventions were not aligned, at least to at the NSP. And these are some of the things that we've been trying to assist departments to do. The pace of reporting also was slow. I mentioned earlier that during year one, only 10 departments were reporting. So we had to work hard as a department to bring the whole of government on board in as far as NSP is concerned. So there's been constant engagements with various departments. Some of the reports that were sent to us were quite repetitive. People will send you a report this week and then send you the same information the next week, which really didn't show any improvement. The interventions not at the same scale to create impact. In other words, most of the departments are and still are reporting on outputs rather than outcomes. But I think it's because the NSP is only young, it's a year old, and over time, hopefully, every year when we report, we'll begin to see improvements and departments will start reporting on outcomes rather than outputs. Interventions from civil society and other stakeholders don't find their way into the reporting, which is the requirement of the NSP, purely because civil society doesn't have one representative that can sign off these reports. But this has been a request of the president that the report that we send to him must be co-signed by civil society. And I think when the National Council comes on board, these are some of the things that it will manage to address. Next slide. And hopefully we see, it's my last. Colleagues, I'm not gonna bore you. Most of what I said here, this slide summarizes and it has recommendations. I think when we share, we can easily share the slides. In the report itself, you'll see the recommendations made per pillar for year 2. Next slide, Busi. And DG, I end with this one, certainly, which is basically what we had planned to do based on those reflections for this current financial year, which is year 2. We need to ensure that structures are in place to root the NSP at local and provincial level in multi-sectoral architecture. And the department is currently working very hard with provinces, premier's offices, and municipalities and districts to establish rapid response teams. We covered basically the whole of Eastern Cape, the 5 districts now have what we have rapid response teams. The national prevention strategy, we need to finalize this as a matter of urgency, hopefully by the end of this financial year. We need to release it so people can start implementing. We need to also make sure that the GBV bills that were approved by Parliament are now promulgated, at least by end of the financial year. And we continue to strengthen response infrastructure. That includes TCCs. As I said, the issue of the forensic lab is a thorny one that we constantly engage, the IMC engages subs on. And I know that there's also an initiative to develop a femicide prevention strategy, apart from the study that is conducted by MRC. Department of Justice also, it's now moving towards conclusion of the femicide prevention strategy. And we'll find a way with Department of Justice to align in these 2 processes of a comprehensive prevention strategy and the femicide one. So that, you know, it doesn't look like there's duplication and lack of coordination. So ADG, over to you.
Okay.
And Non-Dumiso will now.
There's just an additional slide. Thank you, Madam. Sorry for that. There's just an additional slide from Non-Dumiso on the bill or council. Then we're done. Non-Dumiso, If she's not here, I see it says no longer has access to the chat. Are you there, Nondumiso?
Yes, I'm here, Tishi.
Talk, Sisi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can talk to your slide.
Okay, thanks, Chairperson. I think before I begin, I must start with a brief background in terms of the process of developing the bill. After the NSP was approved by the cabinet, the department wanted to establish the council immediately. And we started exploring possible ways and quicker ways to ensure that the council is established. Those avenues that we explored include trying to establish the council through a trust by registering it as a trust. After extensive research, that proved not to be a viable option for us. And then the second option was to introduce the bill to Parliament as a private member's bill. Many stakeholders were not happy with that because it would mean the bill was not going to go through the public participation process. So they were not happy that stakeholders are not going to be part or are not going to contribute in the development of the bill. That left us with your normal process of actually introducing the bill to Parliament, which is to introduce it via cabinet. So the minister actually opted for that option after exploring the ones that I've just explained, which is the process that we embarked on after trying several ways that could not work for us. So the bill was actually developed, and the process that we ended up opting for, it requires a lot of consultation, extensive consultation with stakeholders, and it is compulsory. There is no step that you can skip before introducing the bill to Parliament. So we had to comply with all the requirements of actually developing a bill. Firstly, the bill was submitted to the state law, to the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor for quality assurance and pre-certification, and it was certified as constitutionally sound. And then the bill was submitted to the Presidency for the socio-economic impact assessment. Luckily for us, it didn't take long there because it was exempted from that process on the basis that the NSP, which is the founding document, went through that process and it was compliant. So from there, the bill was submitted to the Directors General clusters for deliberation. When it passed that stage, it was submitted to Cabinet to request for approval to publish the bill in the Government Gazette to solicit public inputs and comments. It was approved and it was published in the Gazette on the 5th of October, 2021. And then it was the department also, in addition to that, in order to reach almost all our stakeholders, including those who do not have access to the internet, who do not know how the Gazette works, we started conducting public consultations in all the 9 provinces. So we went to all the provinces to do public consultations and to gather inputs and comments from various stakeholders. The process was finalized on 30 November. At the same time, to try and expedite the process, we also submitted the bill to NEDLEC, knowing very well that we were too early, but we were trying to actually to speed up the process to make sure that by the time we are ready to go to NEDLEC, at least NEDLEC is aware that we are going to be submitting this bill and what does the bill look like. Fortunately for us, we were invited to NEDLEC. They welcomed our proactiveness, and we were invited to the NEDLEC to introduce the bill before we could submit it formally before we could submit the amended version that incorporates the inputs that we received from the members of the public. So the bill was discussed at NEDLEC yesterday. Now we are left now with the stage whereby we need to sit and incorporate all. We also received written inputs from some organizations. Now we are going to sit and scrutinize and analyze all the inputs received, incorporate them into the bill. And when we finalize that process, hopefully by the end of this month of December, we are going to submit the bill to the NEDLEC for deliberation. NEDLEC has its own internal processes. So we are going to wait for the invitation from the NEDLEC to come and present the bill. That process, I know how it works. Basically, we will be discussing each and every clause of the bill, unlike we did yesterday, whereby we just gave a brief summary of the bill. In this case, now we will sit and deliberate on each and every clause of the bill, take comments and inputs, and incorporate or amend where necessary. That is how far we've gone with the bill. And we are intending, we do not know how long the NEDLEC process is going to take, but we were promised yesterday that they are going to establish a task team that is going to deal with the bill. As soon as we submit the amended version, they are going to invite us to come and discuss the clauses of the bill. That is how far we are. As soon as we get a NEDLEC report, the bill will be submitted back to Cabinet to request now for approval to table it in Parliament. It is also going to be submitted to the Office of the State Law Advisor for the final certification. I think we are left with only two major steps that we need to undergo before we could say we are ready to introduce the bill to Parliament. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Madam Nondumiso. The presentations were quite detailed. Yes, we took a bit of time, but I think it was important that we go through the entire presentation in detail and in an effort to bring our colleagues up to speed on developments up to date. I would like to open for questions and we will then respond thereafter. I've noted Lee Ann, I've noted you. The next hand. Danai, I've noted you. Next hand. Okay, in that order.
Thank you very much, Acting Director General. I just want to first thank everybody for their presentations, Nondumiso and Esther in particular. I think I'll probably just start with maybe more of a suggestion or comment, and then I'm going to go into a few questions that I have. My questions are quite detailed, so I'm not sure, Acting DG, if you would like me to go one question and then have an answer, or if you'd like me to run through all of my questions and then have them.
How many more or less do you have?
I have exactly 14 questions. 14.
Let's take the first 4.
Okay. The first is just more of a comment, Acting DG. So it's just to say, I found this session extremely informative. And I feel very privileged actually to be sitting as part of this interministerial committee and having this presentation presented to us. And I know that there are many other civil society organizations who would probably be envious of the position that we're in. So I probably then would like to just address something that Esther raised in one of the last slides, which is to say that communication generally from government is a bit problematic. And I think that that's actually why we're sitting here today, because to us, the last progress report that is out in the public domain is the one that was produced by the Commission for Gender Equality on ERIP, which wasn't, it didn't show very stellar reviews of the targets. It showed that about 20% of the targets had only been met. And so what we wanted to do then as civil society is to ask the government why it is that implementation is so poor. And this was obviously compounded by the fact that the Minister for Police released the latest crime statistics, which actually showed that sexual offences were at an all-time high. And that's actually what resulted in us producing the petition that we did. And when we didn't get a response, we then proceeded to approach Parliament and the media, and that's why we're sitting here at the moment. So the suggestion that I would make, and I don't know if this is possible, but maybe this or something like it, would it not be possible for this interministerial committee to publish the monthly progress reports that it gives to the President, so that the South African population and civil society organizations know where government is at, because what then that does is it produces a bit more trust and a little less despondency from all of us, especially when we're looking at the stats and specifically the crime statistics. So that is the one suggestion that I would make, Acting DG. Then the next question I'm probably going to first address, because I only have one question for Nondumiso, or rather an observation, and then the rest of my questions are actually for Esther. Nondumiso, so we've been also tracking the National Council on GBVF bill, and the last thing that we have on record, and I actually checked this again this morning to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn when I say this, but the Gazette, or the government Gazette that published the bill on the 5th of October, only says that it was basically presented to Parliament. And I also checked in terms of government speeches and also on the Parliamentary Monitoring Group, PMG, their website. The last thing that was done or said on this bill was the 5th of October when it was introduced to Parliament by the Minister of the Department of Women. And I don't understand that to be an invitation to the public to comment. My organization, the Embrace Project, has been involved in the public participation process of the 3 bills that you mentioned that emanated from the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, and also another bill, the Victim Support Services Bill, which came from the DSD. We participated in the process of all 4 of those bills. So I'm a bit of fey when it comes to what it looks like to invite the public. I didn't see anywhere an invitation to the public, first of all, to make submissions. So there was no deadline, nor was there an address for which we could comment and then make these submissions to thereafter. So I didn't consider the public participation process to even be open. And I know that, and I know this from other civil society organizations, that there was a rumor going around that the public participation process on the bill had actually closed. And I understand from what you said now to actually confirm that. First for Women in particular, who I think put us in touch with the acting DG, and the reason why this meeting has taken place today, she was particularly following that bill and also was shocked to hear that the public participation process had closed. So if that is the case, then I'm not sure how civil society will react when it finds that the bill is actually being processed through Parliament without much substantial input from any of us. And I think you said so yourself, you only received a few written submissions. And I can confirm that all of the civil society groups on this call would definitely have liked to make comment on the bill. And I understand there is an urgency to promulgate it. But given that the Department of Women is sort of being capacitated to fill that gap for the moment, I think it might be more beneficial to go through a proper process and have public and have civil society and the public participate in the promulgation of the bill, rather than to have a challenge later on for any procedural irregularities. Maybe acting DG, maybe I could give then Nondumiso the opportunity to respond to that before I raise questions to Esther.
I have indicated to you that you have 4 questions to raise. Proceed with your other 2 questions.
Okay, sure. Then the other 2 questions that I have so far is on the multi-sectoral platform. This one is for Esther. We would be very interested, obviously, in taking part of this platform, and I think we'd just like to know how it is that we could participate in the platform. And then the third, or rather now I guess the 4th question / comment is on the national prevention strategy. Again, we're very interested in participating in that, and how could we possibly also take part in that?
Okay. Let me, in the interest of time, let me deal with the issues that I can, and so that you can move to your next question. I think the one on the multi-sectoral platform, we will share, communicate with yourselves who the people are that are coordinating the pillars, how you can be a member and all. I think that shouldn't be a problem. We can provide that information. The other one on how you want to participate in the, which one was it? Not the multi-sectoral platform. I can't remember.
Prevention strategy.
The prevention strategy. I think that it shouldn't be a problem. Madam Esther will be able to be in touch with you as a collective, either forward the draft, 0 draft that is there for your comments, or arrange for a session where she can take you through the 0 draft and all. I want to leave it up to her to then further engage you on whatever options that are suitable, but that shouldn't be a problem. The more we get the inputs, the better for all of us. Then the one on the monthly reports, I doubt that there will be challenges in that regard, but we need to touch base with the presidency on the protocols of that kind of information. But ultimately, it becomes information that is supposed to be anyway in the public domain, because it's information that comes from the departments. So again, on that note, we will then revert to yourselves as to how best can we manage that one. But I think when we get to a point where we do overall responses, Esther can also comment on this one. I'm just trying to push this because I've got other meetings. The DG is not in and I'm acting, and there's a lot of meetings online for me. I'd like to ask Nondumiso to talk to the issue of consultation as per the questions that you posed to her. Nondumiso?
Thank you, Chairperson. With regards to the publication in the Government Gazette, I think on our side, because normally that's how we advertise our bills for public inputs, and indeed we received calls and requests by email, the email that is provided there, from stakeholders who were requesting for the copies of the bill. And also, I think the requests were more than the inputs that we received. But I think on our side, we just use the text that we normally use when we publish the bill for public consultation. And also, after the publication of the bill in the Gazette, the department also released a media statement, also calling for inputs from I think the media statement was released on the 7th of October. Immediately after the bill was published. Thanks, teacher.
Okay. I think...
If I may quickly.
Yes, come in.
Whitney, can you type your email address in the chat? And whilst we are answering questions, can you also project the website so people can see the website? We can also share the newsletter, and you are very welcomed to participate. This is voluntary, and in fact, expand this. Yes, we have a problem with communication, but this platform is a way of ensuring that we constantly communicate with the public. And the more people you bring and organizations, the better. We've got so many organizations that we are unable to reach out to everyone in the country. So we also rely on our partners like yourselves to spread the word, to make this people aware. And we find this platform quite useful. So we didn't know probably about you, we didn't know, but now you are here. You can participate and get to know. And the way it functions is you can choose which pillar you want to participate in, depending on the work that your organization is doing. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. With prevention strategy, again, we've started consultations long ago. If you've been left out, drop an email and also invite others, not only yourself, so we can take you through the strategy, draft strategy, so you can provide your input. Thanks, DDG. ADG.
Okay. I do want to indicate that, again, through the very pillar collaboratives, they have been working very closely with the department in sharing the information around the bill, where to access it, what to do, and all of that. And they also assisted us in terms of mobilization of some of the civil society organizations in the specific provinces and regions. So we will then take your next 4 questions, Madam.
Thank you. Can I also have the opportunity to respond to Nondumiso, Acting DG?
You can.
Thank you. Nondumiso, I saw the statement released by the Minister on the 7th, and there's nothing in there specific about inviting the public. So do I understand that the public participation process won't be reopened, given that most of us were not aware? And I know I'm not just speaking for my organization when I say that. Then the next question that I have is to Esther. It's based on the campaigns around taxi drivers and schools, etc. I just wanted to know if there are any impact reports on these campaigns. And we also we have a beneficiary organization that's based in Alexandra who also do fantastic work specifically with the taxi association. So I'm not sure if there might be any room there to include them in the campaigns that you have running currently. Then the next question that I have is on the sexual offences courts and policing. I know that we have some great progressive legislation, but the problem still remains at the level where the ordinary person in South Africa has access to justice and where they engage with the criminal justice system, which is usually at court, in magistrates' courts usually, and also at the policing level. And I'd just like to know how far we are on sensitization training for court officials and for SAPs. And I also am aware that the Minister for the Department of Women, she not that long ago, I think at some point in this year, visited the Randburg Magistrates Court and was quite appalled at how sexual violence victims were being treated by court officials and how long the queues were. So at least we know that government is engaging with what's happening on the ground, but what is being done at that level? The next question then I have is on the forensic services laboratories, so the backlog with the DNA testing. When I read the Commission for Gender Equality's report, they stated that the reason for this backlog was because the automated systems that they had in place were so poorly maintained that they now had to revert to manual analysis. So I'd just like to know what is being done to return to the automated systems and eradicate the backlog. And I think Acting DG, I still have one more question for this round, right?
Okay.
Then my question is on the psychosocial services and the provision of that, particularly for violence-prone communities. Also, again, I saw in the Commission for Gender Equality's report that the DSD, I know, is responsible for this, but I think they're on the line. There was an issue with capacity and the number of social workers, and there was a particular target that had to be reached for bringing on a few more social workers. So really that's like a 2-part question. Has there been mobilization for psychosocial services in violence-prone communities, and have we now reached the targets for appointing more social workers?
Okay, I'm going to ask Prince to respond to the sexual offences one, Brigadier Mncwabi to talk to the DNA one. Unfortunately, in the absence of the Department of Social Development, our colleague who is not here due to ill health, I would like to indicate that the issue of bringing social workers on board is an ongoing discussion at various fora and the FOSA clusters But again, you will realize that we have all experienced budget cuts as government departments. COVID-19 has had its own impact on the work that government is doing. We all had to reprioritize. We all had to allocate whatever we could have allocated to make sure that we are responsive to the pandemic. So it's something that is high on the agenda of government. And I want to believe that once there is an avenue to be responsive to it, particularly from a financial angle, that's what government will consider. But at this stage, it's not something that one can commit and say it should be done by tomorrow or so. Esther, you may come in and then praise and will be the next one, and Brigadier Mnep.
Okay. I just wanted to comment quickly, ADG, on the questions raised around social workers. Just to remind colleagues that the NSP is a 10-year strategy. And what we are working on now is the 5-year. So we may not be able to meet every target in the NSP within 1 year. So I just thought I need to mention that because it's very important. We are having targets that we are implementing for the next 5 years. So DSD might have started with what I reported on earlier on, but it's an ongoing process, as you said.
Okay, I think we've noted the comment made by Esther. And again, taking the collaborative angle, we should recall that it's not only a government responsibility. Yes, government has the primary responsibility, but we are in this as a collective. We also rely and would like to tap on the existing resources of members of civil society on the ground, be it formal NPOs, community-based organizations, churches. I mean, there has been a number of training in the form of investments done to the churches where people have been trained either as lay counselors or what. We should try and think as creative as possible collectively so that all of us, we are able to stretch the resources that we have and be responsive to the best of our ability without trivializing the issue of bringing in social workers. More so, we are noting that some of the social workers are unemployed as we speak, and it's a matter that is being constantly raised. But you will agree with me, even if I were to make a very simple practical example, you may wish to have an assistant in your household, but if you don't have the finances to take care of that responsibility, you are not going to be in a position to bring in that person, because ultimately you need to be able to also address the whole issue of remuneration and everything else that goes with that thing. So we will continue to play an advocacy role as a Department of Women. It's something that we will never let go until such time that we realize that we can go up till this far and we can't go beyond this. Can we take a praise?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation and also for the questions. So mine is on, I'll be responding to the issue that relate to the sexual offences courts, but I would just like to say first that I don't know whether it was reflected here, but maybe this was a deliverable for the ERAB. We put together the regulations relating to sexual offences courts. That's the title for the document. And as you know that the sexual offences courts is a homegrown model. It is South Africa that started with these courts. Other countries now are following suit. We have a number of countries who are visiting us to see how the model is implemented. So then we decided as a country, so that it stays ahead in the globe in terms of the implementation of the model, to make these courts now statutory courts, because they were not previously. It will take me another day for you to explain as to what do I mean But in a nutshell, is to say that we did not have, as you know, that we have the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, which had no provision that was speaking to these courts. So now we incorporated a provision there so that these are the courts that have a statutory status, meaning that they are here to stay in South Africa. And there is a piece of legislation that guides then the implementation thereof and the operation of these courts. So now we have what we call it the Section 55, capital A, which then is a provision that is establishing these courts. But it starts then by saying that we need then to have these courts at high court level, at regional court level, and also at district court level. District court level, it is because of the fact that the bail applications are had at the district court level. So we felt that we need to recognize and to guide the process in which they will be dealing with these cases. So now you will have now with Section 55 capital A, you will have courts now that are called Section 55 capital A sexual offences courts at district court level that will be dealing with those bail applications. And then you have them at regional court where then, those cases, then the cases are trial ready and they will be tried. And you also have those then that will be going to high court. Let's say there's a murder, there was rape, there was this and so on. Those most serious sexual offences that will be dealt with by the High Court. So we're going to be having them at all these levels, all right? And now coming to the regulations, so as to respond to your question, we have first in this provision, in this act, the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, we have Section 54 there. Section 54, it prohibits, in a nutshell, it prohibits bystanderism in matters that relate to sexual offences. It places a responsibility on any member of the public to take action and report any perpetration of sexual violence against children and persons with mental disabilities. So this is a provision that is aligned to the Presidential Summit Declaration, because as we know that Article 1 and Article 2 of the Presidential Summit Declaration makes it very clearly. It says that every person living in South Africa, I'm paraphrasing it, every person living in South Africa must take the responsibility to end gender-based violence and femicide. And this is based on the fact that there is no one who is born a criminal. There is no one who is born a sex offender. So it started somewhere. And the starting point is usually with parenting. So if we don't involve people from the home setting, we will miss it. All right. So if we don't involve you as a parent, because you have a responsibility of bringing an end to what we are having in the country, and all of us as we are in this meeting, we have to do something. All right. So now the regulations, then we then incorporated in them the regulations relating to sexual offences courts, we incorporated a regulation that then opens a door for civil society to come to provide what we call in the regulation the court support services. So we are calling them the court supporters. So they are coming into the court then to say that we are here to ensure that we eliminate secondary traumatization from the court system. We are here to provide then the court accompaniment services. We are here to assist with court preparation services and also to provide any kind of support that will be required by a victim of sexual offenses. So what it means is that then we have taken the sexual offenses court, aligned them with the Presidential Summit Declaration that says that everybody must take responsibility And we incorporated in the Act Section 54 that says that we can criminalize bystanderism, and we have to have all persons living in South Africa taking responsibility for sexual offenses. All right, because this is a national problem. It's for everybody. It's not only for government. So then we said that for the sexual offences courts now, let's bring a civil society to say that we can work with you. We can ensure that we bring a caring system. We bring something that will be placing the victim at the center of the criminal justice system. So my response to you is to say that the doors are open. Doors are open for the civil society to come to our courts, the sexual offences courts, and be able to provide services for the victim. The only thing that you need to do is to register with the Department of Department of Social Development, and then when you get to the courts, then you will be, if you are saying that yes, I have been registered with the Department of Social Development, and then the court preparation officers, the NPA, and so on will recognize you, and you will be provided even space where there is possible, so that you are able then to provide, because we want to collectively with civil society clean up the system, because the person who is serving a person who is at a service point there is a member of a community, is a member of a family. So it comes to the court system with that attitude and everything. So we need then to collectively, as people living in South Africa, to ensure that we have a criminal justice system that works. So basically that is what I can say here in terms of the sexual offences courts. But now with the Section 55 capital A sexual offences courts, these are the courts now that we are in the process of establishing, because they start with the process of the designation. It's not the designation of the sexual offences courts, it's the designation of the courts where the sexual offences courts will be established. So we are at that level of the designation. It's only just that it needs a lot of stakeholder participation and concurrence. We are waiting now for the concurrence from the Office of the Chief Justice. The minister has already written there. So as soon as we get the concurrence, then we'll be able then to establish the new breed of sexual offences courts in South Africa, which we are calling now the Section 55 capital A sexual offences courts. Thank you.
Okay, General Mnep, Brigadier, please come in.
Thank you so much, Acting DDG. The issue of the DNA, I'm going to just explain a little bit the backlog at the Forensic Science Lab. The causes of the backlog was multifaceted, but amongst the problem that we had was one that has been raised on capacity. The other one was consumable contracts. And these are some of the things that led to us having this number of cases not dealt with. The numbers that we're talking about at the around first quarter of last year, it was around about 40. From around about the beginning of the financial year, some of these issues have been resolved. The issue of the consumables have been resolved. The issue of capacity has also been resolved, as well as the contracts. All those things have been resolved. On the 26th, which was Friday, we had a meeting with the board that is advising the National Commissioner, as well as the Minister of Police on DNA. In that meeting, there was also the head of the Forensic Science Laboratory giving the board the breakdown of what have they done because of the resolution of these the issues that were mainly causing the backlog. The date that they gave us on that day, that by the 24th of November of this last month, they have down managed the backlog to round about 89,000. that were outstanding. The way that they are progressing with dealing with the backlog, by the end of March next year, the first quarter of next year, they would have resolved all the issues regarding the backlog. Remember, the information that they gave us already is that they ring-fenced all those backlog, all of them, right? So in other words, when they were down managing this backlog, they are also doing the current cases at the record rate, right? So we provided them with overtime, with the capacity problem. So all those things have been resolved, right? The technical, the machinery that we have, we are coping very well with what we have for now. But they guaranteed us that by the end of March, we won't have a backlog. They might be even earlier. If you can look at the rate they are down managing them, even before the end of March, they would have resolved the issue of the backlog, right? But the main issues were consumables as well as the contracts, which have been finalized. The contract of people that are providing our service have been finalized. So in other words, the contracts are in place. Everything that we need to make sure that the forensic science laboratory works is in place. So as we stand now, the backlog will be solved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if there are further responses, try and stick to one place. We kept on losing you here and there, but we could hear you at some point, so we are quite clear. I just want to address something, Leanne. I think the notion that we only called you because we were contacted by First for Women is a misleading notion, which I want to clarify and address. Shortly after we saw this matter on ENCA, we convened a meeting, and I think she can share with you the emails to demonstrate to you that we cross-referenced to our own meetings as the task team of IMC to say, here is a matter that is now in the public domain, we need to be responsive. We battled a great deal. Our communicator is in our midst to try and get access to who are the actual main coordinators and how do we get hold of them. We've been in touch with some of the people at ENCA and quite a number of, we even had to search the websites and all to try and get hold of the people. The only one that we could get easily was that of Laura. And at the time when she called, I said to her, I am trying my best to convene a meeting and I'm struggling. And she said, oh, I have the details. I can provide you. And I said, welcome, do so. So that should be cleared, because if this kind of information gets to the public domain and to the portfolio committee, it is going to be misinterpreted or misconstrued in a manner that is not correct. It is not correct that we only responded because First for Women asked us to do so. So let us then move to the next item. And what we intend doing after this, colleagues, is that we are going to put a very simple letter of some sort to yourselves to acknowledge that we convened, we met, we took you through the following key documents or whatever the case may be, so that you are also acknowledging that we have responded to your outcry at the end of the day. And I'm looking forward to you being actively involved in these pillar collaboratives, because all those that are involved are in the loop, are giving their contributions. We give it our all, irrespective of what is in store for me, because we are in this as a collective to make sure that South Africa is a place that is free for all from a gender perspective, I mean, from a gender-based violence perspective and all of that. So I'm really going to plead with you and say, come, bring your all, your brains, your thinking, you name it, everything. At the end of the day, as women that are concerned in this country, we can turn the tide collectively. Now, let's take your other 4 questions, because one of my colleagues needs to leave. Start with Esther. There's an urgent meeting that she has to go to.
Thank you, Acting DG. I just want to remind, please, Nondamiso to respond to my question to her. And then the remainder are for Esther. It's to just ask about The training for legislators. When I talk about targets, I'm not talking about the NSP targets, which are the 10-year period. I'm actually still referring back to ERIP, which had the 6 months targets. And I know that training for legislators was one of them, and I know that the target wasn't met. So I'd just like to know if there's been any movement on that. And the reason I ask that is because having been involved in the Sexual Offences Amendment Act Amendment Bill last year, we still found problems in the act that was passed. There were still major gender biases when it came to the definition of rape and consent, and it's something that we're actually going to bring a legal challenge to. So I'd just like to know when legislators will also be thrown into the training. And I'm not entirely sure also with the last set of questions that my question on... Hello? Oh. And I'm not sure if, like with the last set of questions, my question on sensitization training for police and court officials was answered. Then the last of my questions actually just pertains to rapid response teams and provincial emergency teams. I'd just like to know if those have been set up. Those are also just from ERIP. And that actually just, concludes all of the questions that I have. Thank you, Acting DG.
Okay. Let me check whether Esther is still here. Esther? Okay, she left. Or she temporarily
No,
joined.
I'll respond quickly.
Respond, then I'll release you for the next meeting.
Can I remind Leanne? Leanne, ERAP was a 6 months plan, literally. And it helped us at that time because there was urgency and the NSP was not ready yet to be released. We're still working on that. So we ran out of time. 6 months, is not enough to do everything that we had committed to. But I think we're overzealous. We were under a lot of pressure and we recognized that and we took that on board. So we set targets for ourselves, some realistic, some unrealistic. And before we even know it, towards the end of the 6 months, we were hit by COVID. And I think ADG made it very clear. That's another thing that impacted on our ability to do certain things that we planned, because we had to, all of us, reprioritize. And budgets were taken away from all the departments without exception and redirected to COVID. So some of these are challenges and limits. We feel the same way that you do, that money shouldn't have been taken, at least for implementation of gender-based violence, because the president declared that it's a crisis. So it's running, it coexists with COVID. So those are some of the reasons why some of those targets could not be met. But we then integrated the outstanding issues from ERAP into the NSP. Now we're talking NSP, not ERAP anymore. But rest assured, anything that we said we would do in ERAP is now integrated into the NSP, and we continue to do that work. In terms of rapid response teams, we've started with Eastern Cape, as I said. We then moved to KZN. It's work in progress, Leanne. And we've got targets per year. We're not going to cover the whole of the country at the same time. But Eastern Cape is ahead, as I said, 5 districts. We've got rapid response teams. My team has been working very, very hard, going to provinces, engaging, because we do this in collaboration with provinces, and civil society, by the way, form part of those rapid response teams. We work through the Premier's office. So I would urge you, wherever you are based, NOMSA, any of my colleagues here can type NOMSA's email. She's the one responsible and driving establishment of rapid response team. We'd be too happy if your organization gets involved, because remember, this is a multi-sectoral approach, and we are aware that we're not able at any point in time to reach out to everybody, every civil society organization. So now that you have the information, please feel free, whatever province you are based in, it would be good if you get involved. NOMSA can start, put you on the database. Yeah, and please encourage others, because these are very important teams that we really want to use at local level.
I'm going to stop
help
you.
us. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Esther. I would like to release you. I'll do my best in dealing with the other issues.
Thank you.
Noting that you are the expert in this field, but I'll do my best. I just want to indicate, Leanne, as Esther mentioned, at some point, we would like to hear what is it that you are bringing to the party as well. Hence, the NSP says harness all, and it even used the all as an uppercase. We would like a situation where there's no finger pointing, a situation where, as I keep on saying, pulling together, where we augment each other, where we find ways of seeing how do we plug in where there are gaps. So I'm still hopeful that with the expertise that you have, the zeal that you have, you will add value to our current unfolding processes as well. Now let's then take, Nondumiso, you'll come in last. I just want to allow the others, because it was Danai and we lead towards closure, so that colleagues one can then attend to the other meetings. Otherwise, I'll be reported to say I didn't do my job at that time well. Danai?
Thank you so much. This, I think, has been very informative. And I think to fully acknowledge, I think, all the work that has gone in, and understanding just how there's a lot of process that goes into the implementation of some of the plans that have been highlighted. So I don't think I'm going to ask questions per se, but I think I'm going to speak to what you had mentioned about the collaborative approach, and to maybe especially give context on our work as change.org. So what we have generally are, citizens that start petitions. And for the most part, they start these petitions based on, I guess, either lived experiences someone in their community has experienced, especially women who've themselves actually been victims of gender-based violence, and where they are seeing a gap that they expect to have been covered or something to be in place. So whether it's they were expecting to be able to go and have a rape kit available when they reported their case. They wanted to make sure that their case moves speedily, but there's a massive backlog. The issue around legislation comes up quite a lot in terms of the bills being finalized. I think the general safety of women and communities and everything. And I think essentially, what we see with the petitions, it's literally a plea. It's women trying to have their voices heard and looking for a platform where they can find collaborators who identify with the causes that they've put down and essentially support those causes. And we try to make sure that we bring those causes to light and hopefully see action. So I think my hope is that, I think for us, gender-based violence is such a critical issue in the country. And our hope is that, I think going into the coming year, especially now, obviously, with the solid understanding of everything that is happening on the ground, that we would have hopefully an open doorway to be able to come directly to you with some of these petitions, because I feel there are large-scale things that are definitely going to take time to be implemented. But I think there are some maybe lower-hanging implementable measures that I feel that would be greatly appreciated, especially by the petition starters, because some of them are dealing with things that could be done fairly easily. And I think we would love to be able to bring those petitions directly to you as they come up, so you can begin to see and hear the voices, the pleas, the cries of women who are taking their issue areas and turning them into campaigns, I think from almost a place of desperation. So they don't get to hear everything that Ma'am Esther, Nondumiso, and everyone else is doing in the background. What they're seeing is what they're experiencing when they go and report something, or what they experienced in their home when they're violated. And essentially, we want to be able to come with those causes to you and to see the things that are implementable, see them actioned quicker, for us to also see the responses coming through, just with that understanding that we are walking the journey together, and something that is maybe bigger than like that's not actionable very quickly, at least an acknowledgement of this is where we are, these are the steps we're taking, this is how far we need to go. we would love to celebrate the victories that come out of building a relationship with you, and to see these women celebrating that whatever they stood up for, the petitions that they put together, the campaigns that they put together actually caused real change. So I'll hold on the questions. I just wanted to mention that before we end.
That's quite pleasing, Danai, and we are pledging our commitment to do our level best at all times. We don't sleep. Every news on TV or radio, it's not just news to us. Whatever that is on TV, when other people are saying we're celebrating June 16, just as an example, or a holiday. Holidays are never holidays for us. It's work. News to us, it's work. The moment I switch on my TV, even my family knows. The moment it says, Lusigi, this happened, to me, it's just not breaking news. I immediately jump. I follow through. I call Lusigi, police station, I call Lusigi, social development, everybody, and I activate and I demand responses. But I demand responses at that point in time from a reactive point of view, and I demand responses in being proactive as to how do we prevent a repeat of this. So we are really committed. With the limited budget that we have, the limited human resources that we have, we are doing our level best. Hence, we want to make sure that we tap on all of you so that we massify whatever programmatic interventions that we have with all of you, and we make sure that the reach is expanded to many who may need our help or services. So I can promise you, and my plea and appeal is that, not that I don't appreciate pledges, what is it, not pledges, petitions per se, but if you are in the collaborative and the people that are concerned with certain things are informing you about where the gaps are or what the issues are, you are able to raise them there, and we are able to agree in this collaborative who is from that province, which part of this work is for the collaborative, but there's also work that is for government. We can't just dump everything to the collaborative. Some of the things we can tell that this one, I just need to escalate. I need to bring it to the attention of this minister or this director general and all. It is specific to this particular department. So if we can keep that part of the collaborative active and we all do our part in there, that will assist. We will minimize the level of petitions. Not that we don't want them done, don't get me wrong, but at least we will be more proactive in our approach. Some of the things, even if we can't do them immediately, we will say, can we put them in our plan for the next financial year or the other year or whatever the case may be. That's how we work around these issues in the way we do our work. So let's take it from there. I don't want to belabor the point, but you have my commitment to working with all of you through all the relevant structures. We will take it from there. I just want to check whether we have other further questions from other colleagues. Okay, it looks like we've covered everything, and the spirit within which we've engaged is truly appreciated. The commitments that are coming from everybody who is a participant here are truly appreciated. We meet at the collaborative, and we will make sure that we are responsive as government if we have to, but that we are responsive collectively as well as a collaborative. I wish you all the best, and we'll find a mechanism of keeping you in the loop. We'll decide amongst ourselves whether we go back to civil society. Is it quarterly? Is it 6 monthly? We will have to come up with a mechanism so that we have everybody on board on these issues in terms of our progress. I really would like to propose that we adjourn and indicate that, commit that you will be receiving a letter from us as an attempt to have responded to your concerns, and we will take it from there, fellow colleagues. I don't know. Leanne, you're closing, your parting shots?
No, I just wanted to actually say a big thank you, Acting DG. Having us or including us in this discussion really does show the level of care and commitment from the government. I guess It was just a matter of us being having our questions answered, and that is why I posed as many questions as I did now, so that I could go away with certain answers. And I didn't want that to come across as an attack, but rather pure curiosity. And I probably also just need to restate our absolute commitment and our desperation to get involved in particularly the multi-sectoral platforms and any other measures that we could possibly make a difference and assist government as well. So I just wanted to say that, and just a parting big thank you for taking out 3 hours of your very precious time.
A big hug from me, and thanks. Dana, take care, all of you. We will see each other when we meet at the Pillar Collaborative. And to my fellow colleagues from government, thank you for spending your time. And I wish you all well. Those of you that celebrate Christmas or festive season, have the best of it. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, ADG.